Welcome back, everybody, to the Construction CEO podcast. I am your host, Jonathan Core, and today I have Tammy Birklid, who is the president and owner of Merit Construction, a full-service general contractor based out of Tacoma, Washington. Welcome to the show, Tammy.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, super excited. So before we get into your story, your perspective on the industry, I actually wanted to start in a really unique spot and then basically get your reaction on this. So about a year ago on LinkedIn, you posted something. I'm going to read it. And then I want to get more of your thought process behind it. But this is what Tammy posted about a year ago. She said, "It's my nature to seek good when things feel hard." Pete Carroll's former Seattle Seahawks coach, mom said it well. Something good is just about to happen. It is no secret that being a business owner and a leader of any kind can be challenging at times. I have definitely experienced my fair share of challenges along the way. And truthfully, it is not always easy to see what good can come out of a really challenging situation. I do know that I have seen the most growth and positive change in myself by going through hard things. There's a reason it is called, quote unquote, growing pains, right? As something grows, it is stretched to a place it hasn't been before. That is uncomfortable. But just because it is uncomfortable doesn't mean it's not good. I will only be as successful as my willingness to be uncomfortable. The mindset pushes me forward because I believe I will come out on the other side a stronger and better leader for my team. So a lot of really good stuff here, but so there's always this story behind, a certain post. So I'm just curious, what inspired this post and what was happening like over a year ago, at least from what you recall, that inspired, you to post this?
Well, I can remember exactly what happened during that time. I had a couple of staff members that were super critical to what we do. They were part of our culture. They were just really positive impacts in our company. And two people within 1 month left to pursue things that they believed were going to be something better for them. And when something like that happens, it's scary. First, you question yourself as a leader. Why are they leaving? You might be offended. You might, some people, with someone leaves your company, you're like, they're dead to me now. And that is the last thing I feel like. I want to ask myself, what ways did I maybe let them down? And the other thing for me is that I've always told all of my employees that one of my roles is to grow every person that works with us to their fullest potential. I want what's best for them. That's what I tell them. So if they have an opportunity that they believe is better for them, and one of the individuals had been with me 6 years, one of them had been with me 12 years.
Wow.
And in fact, the companies that they went to were bigger. They had more of an opportunity for training from other people, maybe somebody that they could look at as a direct mentor to grow into a position above what they were doing. If I say that I want to grow them, if I say I want the best for them, all I can do is, be happy for them. But it doesn't mean it wasn't really, really hard for me. And yeah, that's what that time frame was about, and that's what the post was about. It was about reminding myself and other leaders, anybody who might take something from it, that just because something is hard doesn't mean it's wrong.
No. There's an interesting perception, especially when you think of like the dynamics between employer and employee. Typically people, this is my assumption, especially to what I see on LinkedIn, just across multiple industries, like your employers, stoic, emotionless, all these, it's just business. But the reality is the leaders at the top, regardless of maybe how business focused they are or not, are still humans. And so they have emotions. And so naturally, as a result, it is like, hey, like when somebody leaves you, it's like, oh yeah, you know what, then go ahead and go. That for me personally, that's what my response wants to be. But I'm curious, like, because I assume that, there likely have been, people who've come and go here as well, like any business. I'm curious, how do you think you went about developing that mindset? Because the reality is that I feel like most people get stuck on one of two things. One of them is, you're done, like whatever, go ahead, go, or kind of indifference, like, okay, cool, now on to the next person. So I guess, like, knowing that I mean, it sounded like maybe one of those wanted to be like a natural response, but I guess, how did you get to this state where you're like, in a sense, kind of have to see obviously the bigger picture, as well as, hey, if you really, hey, if I have your best interest as an individual, as a professional, that's great. Hey, I wish you the best in this next season. How did you develop that approach and mindset?
I think that it's just wanting to be genuine, wanting who I say I am to be true. We talk about that a lot as a company, be who we say we are. You can't say we're transparent. We're going to be here for you. And, you do those things, you have those conversations in a sales meeting, but then not actually carry that out.
Yep.
It's really what you do after, or what you do when no one's looking. That's the important part. When someone decides that they're going to make a change, I do think it's natural to be hurt. If you're a man, you don't want to use the word hurt. You can be offended. No. You can be frustrated, disappointment. All of those emotions and feelings come through. Yep. But as I was saying, I speak this language all the time to my employees, that I care about them. I feel like that's what makes our culture at this company different. I believe that the people that work here believe that I care about them. And so if all of a sudden, when they make a choice that might be best for their family, it might be best for them, they just might need something different. I mean, things happen in your life where you're just like, I just don't feel like I don't feel like this place is challenging me to the level I need. If I took it personally, and if I took it like I'm offended, I just think that I don't think that's the whole picture. And it isn't that, like I said, it isn't that it doesn't upset me, because it really does upset me. Yeah. It's hard to invest in someone for years and have them be part of who you are as a company and have them leave. But it's just simply, as I said, wanting to be true to what I've said the whole time. I think if I acted like a jerk at the end when they wanted to do something different, it would leave a real bitter taste in their mouth. Yeah. And if someone's been a great part of your company, do you want to burn a bridge as they walk out the door? Or do you want to leave the door open for them to grow a little bit, have some different experiences, and then maybe come back and bring that growth back to your company?
Yeah. Well, and the reality, especially too in like this industry, it's just even though a lot of the work that's being done is big, it's really impactful. It's still a tight knit community. Like, a lot of people know each other, and so you never know who can make their way back. Because sometimes people may have the perception, and I'm sure we all fall into this, of like the grass is greener on the other side. And especially for me with like even marriage, like there are certain situations where I'm like, oh man, like I wish this could change. And I heard this years ago. It's like, the grass is not greener on this other side. The grass is green where you water it. And so for me, I'm just like, I think that same thing applies to relationships here. And so although the human response, like you said, is hurts, is maybe it does feel like betrayal, all these emotions, but in light of that, especially too as a leader, is like, there has to be a level of like, hey, we still like, you still need to remain like a pillar and strong, because it's interesting. I heard this a few years ago from a leader who, like, somebody was leaving this team, and he's like, well, as your employer, like, I'm bummed, but as your friend, hey,
yeah,
I love that. So it's kind of both things, because obviously there's going to be a gap there from that standpoint. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I do think it comes with a lot of emotion, negative, positive, and I think it serves you the best. You mentioned the small community that construction
Yeah.
is. It's tiny,
Yep.
and even people that are direct competitors have real conversations because we understand how hard what we do is. Construction is not easy on any level. And being a general contractor in particular, you get squeezed from every side. So if somebody calls me about an employee, we have real conversations. So I just think it's always important not to burn a bridge, whether you're an employee or an employer. And for me, I always want them to know, provided this is true,
Yep.
that the door is open and we can find a place for them because we know they are an impactful employee.
Yeah, and so I'm curious, like, you mentioned obviously those two individuals transition from here, and you write that post. I'm sure there's likely, I mean, I'm not sure what your process is. We don't have to get into it, but there's a grieving process of, okay, I have to, give me a few days or weeks, and then we'll be good. So that happens. You lose two key players. You mentioned one 12 years, one 6 years. Then I guess from there, what do you do? Is it just find somebody right away, or I'm just curious your approach. What did you do now that you addressed, hey, this is just a growing pain?
Yeah. So one of the employees, I feel like he left because he felt like there wasn't anything necessarily right in front of him that was going to be challenging and that he could see. As you know, in construction, sometimes you've got a backlog for 2 years. Sometimes you have nothing for somebody
Yep.
tomorrow. So I tend to be have complete faith that something's coming.
Yep.
Something's always coming.
Love it.
And that's part of what I said in that post. And so what I do is I keep my eyes open. I keep my ears open. I start thinking about what was important about that employee. What do I need? What can we bridge this gap temporarily with others? And if we can, then we run lean until the right fit comes. Or we get in a position where we've grown and we have an immediate need and we need to fill that gap, right away.
Yeah.
But I try to think about, just really do some analysis on the individuals. Why were they so important? One of the employees I lost was absolutely positive all the time. He lifted others up. He just smile on his face coming in the door. The whole vibe of the room goes up. And when you lose somebody like that, we have others like that here, and I'm grateful for them every day. But when you lose somebody like that brings up, they're like the vibe tech of the company. That's hard.
Yeah.
So I was watching for that type of an employee, knowing I needed that. And it didn't have to fill the same role, but I needed that within the company. And that is one of his many, many skills.
Yeah.
But that was an important component for me. The other employee had, crazy skills for the accounting side, but more than the accounting side, there was a deep care for us being the best. She shared my desire to be an employer of choice where we wanted to have something that other places didn't have. And she was my everything of bouncing ideas off of dreaming together, of talking together, of making something, turning it into reality.
Yep.
So I'm not gonna lie. There was a long period of grieving with that, but it's always wanting to learn something from it, to not go backwards, one thing I can tell you you don't do is just fill the hole with anyone. You have to understand what that person did for the company, for the culture, for your clients. All of the things that they filled, you need to figure out, is there someone else in the company that can take part of that? And we can find, sometimes it's a great opportunity to look at, do we need to shift workloads? Is everybody working to their strengths, or is something really hard for someone and they would be better doing something else? I just try to look at it as an opportunity to make sure that I have the right people and to know and understand what I'm looking for. It took me well over a year to replace the individual from the finance side, because that's such a critical part of your business. It has to be someone you trust. It has to be someone who has a wide variety of skill sets. And then the financial for us also goes into the human resources side. So all these incredible things that I relied on that past employee for, just one of the most trusted people ever for me. So it was really important. And for a long time, I did a lot of that role myself. I didn't do it anywhere near as well as others, but I have that background, so I was capable. My employees might question, because every once in a while they wouldn't get their pay stub on time. They got their paycheck, but they didn't get their pay stub. I just didn't do it as well. I'm not as black and white and as accounting rigid as someone needs to be in the role. And then with the other role, we took about 6 to 8 months, and have since increased by 2 in that particular role, which for us, we're a fairly small firm. So I feel really great right now. I feel like we've got all the right people in the right spots, and we've grown since that time. But I think that what gets you through it is believing in yourself, believing in your current staff, and believing that something good is coming. I think that way when we don't get a project, I always think there's a reason we didn't get this project. And one, I tell my staff, well, I feel sorry for the owner because they didn't choose the right team. And I believe that. I mean, that's what makes it easy for me, because I truly believe in the people that work here. And I'm like, too bad for them, but you know what? Something better's coming.
Wow. You gave me a lot. I have like 10,000 thoughts and 10,000 directions. This is awesome. You alluded to it earlier. You said transparency. Is transparency like a core value, or is that something you guys talk about? Or I'm just curious.
Yes, transparency is super critical with our clients.
Yep.
As a general contractor, you can sometimes get the reputation of being shady.
Yep.
I always want to be transparent. I just, it's really important to me. We have nothing to hide. Everything should be able to be shown to the client.
Yeah, right on the table. So the reason I asked that is, I agree. This can happen a lot, and I don't blame. This isn't unique to construction. It's just in corporate America. It's like we believe in integrity and transparency, but it's just all words. That's all it is. And so the fact that you mentioned transparency earlier, and here's the first thing I want to say, is the fact that you just kind of unpacked your overall thought process, and even to how granular you were getting, is one, for me, I honestly think more executives should be like this, because especially too, for me as an audience, as a listener, somebody who's interested in your story, I'm like, oh wow, like you're a human being. You have, you have your own way of reasoning and wrestling through things. And I think even too, to go further past that, there's 2 other things. One of them, as you mentioned, one of your team members just had a vibe about him where he just walked into the room and just lifted it up. It's interesting. I was talking to one of the previous guests and construction CEO, and we were having a private conversation, but he's like, honestly, Jonathan, I'm at the point now where I realize I built my company a lot on like very technical people, having people who just kind of think technically, and there was no life. they did really good. All he's like, now I just want people who are positive. I want people who are just uplift. Like that's where I want to walk into, and it took him a lot, to be able to realize that. But you're in a sense saying the same thing, saying, hey, the culture, the dynamic of not just what we do, but just the feel that we get when we walk into, whether it's these offices or your project. There's just something that we want for it to. And for me, I think it's definitely culture. I do think it's brand, those sort of things. And so that's what, definitely got me thinking about those specific individuals. The other thing I like specifically on the people side, I mean, I'm curious. So it's interesting too that, you've basically laid out how, okay, so there's contractors who hire warm bodies mainly because they need, hey, I need somebody to fill this role. Like there's and I get it. But the fact that you said, hey, there's a saying that says, hey, we're going to slow down to speed up. We're going to reel it back in just to really audit. Where are we at? Are we really who we say we are? You're just auditing all these sort of things. And then you're like, hey, until we find the right person, you said it took a year. I mean, can every contractor say that or do that? Probably not. I mean, because eventually they get tired. Like, I don't want to keep doing the finance or the payroll, all these, but that's what you did mainly because it's really cool to see that your commitment and allegiance to creating the right culture and finding the right person is far more important than just filling this role and then constantly churning. People are in and out, in and out, in and out. And so my question is, I guess, like, have you had seasons throughout Merit where you did have to stay true to that, philosophy of like, hey, we're going to hire slow. We're going to try to find the right people, even though there was hey, look, we have projects or there's a lot of things going on. I'm curious how you navigated those seasons when it was really busy and hey, we need to fill, but we also want to make sure that the culture is intact.
Yeah, you can't always just find the right people when you have a project that's coming into play and a client has expectations and you don't have a project manager. You have to find a project manager.
Yep.
So the one thing we do is we always try to mix, if there's a project manager that's new, he's going to be mixed with a superintendent that's seasoned at Merit. He's going to be mixed with a project engineer that's seasoned at Merit. Right. We have an operations manager that's going to be checking in. I attend 1 to 2 meetings a month, always to ensure that the client there's a good vibe at the meetings, that there's trust going on there. We have a lot of checks and balances to make sure that that person is right.
Yep.
The most important part is what you do when they're not right. Sometimes you have to do something that doesn't necessarily please the client, or the team feels like this is going to be really challenging. We talk about it as a team. Can we limp along through this? Can other people step in and step up to cover, and go ahead and keep this individual on until the end of the job? For continuity's sake, for, the things that are of value, or is there damage being done to our company through the negativity, through showing of disrespect, through not coming in on time? All of those things affect your other employees. Yep. And it's not right or fair for them to watch that happening when they're working on a Saturday and they're doing the extra, and then you've got this other person that doesn't fit the culture. We say a lot too that we work for each other. All of us understand we work for each other. I'm only here because I have employees that are out there going the extra mile, being the kind of people that Merit is built on character. Yep. That's our number one focus. We can train anybody on almost anything, but if they don't have character, it's just not going to work. If they aren't good people when no one's watching, if they don't care about the success of their teammates, it's just not going to work. Yeah. So you have to let people go sometimes at a time when, you tried,
Yep.
you brought them in, you were hopeful. Sometimes people seem like they're going to be a fit. They say all the right things in the interview. They're like, oh yeah, we're on the same page. Oh, that's who I am. I'm so excited to work for this place. And then the reality is that's not true. That their true colors show through, and you're like, okay, we need to release this person, and now we're going to have to cover and work to find somebody else. I in fact have had one of the things that my controller did was payroll, and I went through 3 different people because I was like, I can do the finance side. I can't do the payroll and the finance side.
Yep.
I should do what only I can do, which is like meeting with clients, helping grow the staff. But so there was a turnover.
Yeah.
There was 3 people in a row that went through here within a year that it was just not a fit. And that was hard. And I felt like I was letting my team down because they're like, what's the problem?
Yep.
And I even talked to one of my employees, and she's like, she hadn't been here very long. So she said, I'm having a hard time because I feel like this is a good place to work. Am I missing something? Like, why is this happening? And then I got this gut feeling like as people were revolving, people were like starting to question, am I missing something? So it's hard when that happens. But you have to tell your employees, we're good, we're okay, that wasn't a good fit. Be open.
Yep.
Don't just say nothing. Certainly don't want to badmouth the employee that didn't work out. There's nothing in that for anybody.
Yep.
You stay positive. You say it wasn't a good fit. If a couple things happened, they know. They saw the errors or they saw the issues or whatever. But you just let them know, I'm continuing to look for the right person.
Yep.
We're going to find the right person.
Yep.
And that's kind of the best you can do. Have I had to put a warm body in before? Absolutely, I have. Sometimes those warm bodies work out, and sometimes you just have to deal with the consequences of knowing that you didn't get to fully vet out the individual. You just have to fail fast. If it's not the right person, then you just have to let them know, let your staff know you didn't choose the perfect person for the role, and be open about it and move on.
It's really interesting too, because I do think that this applies a lot to like leadership. In every situation is one, I feel like team members are hyper aware of their leaders, whether the leader knows or not. And, there's been instances in the past where somebody will quote me on something. I'm like, I said that? I'm like, oh, why did I say that? But so for me, I'm saying this especially too, is like being intuitive as a leader is super important, because it's like, you just don't know whether it's the verbal cue that what you're saying, but then the other thing is, what are you not saying? What's your body language? What is your demeanor like? Because people pick up on that. And so I'm curious with the dynamic of a team member saying like, is something wrong? Like, because like you said that, like, I guess for you as a leader, is it just strictly just being, hey, like reinforcing, hey, like we're going to try to find the right person? Or are there other things that can help build trust? Because obviously from like a team member standpoint is, you're, in my opinion, you're selling them on, hey, here's why you should stay here. Here's what, because the reality is just because they're here doesn't mean they're going to be here forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so a goal as a leader is like, how do I keep the right people engaged so they want to grow, so they stay here for the long haul? So I'm curious for you, how do you look at like reinforcing, positivity in the midst of maybe some bumps along the road? Yeah,
it's definitely heavier check-ins during that time. One-on-ones. One-on-ones for us during the COVID timeframe were highly critical. I don't know if we would have made it without that. And sometimes they needed to be remote, but I met one-on-one with every single employee that I have. I needed to get a gauge. How are you feeling? Are you okay? How are you feeling about what's going on around you?
Yeah.
So when I get a feeling that someone's like questioning something, or if they haven't been with the firm very long and I haven't had the opportunity to build trust, I do say, we'll get there. There will come a time that you'll trust me. I will have proven myself.
Yep.
It's the same when you're trying to sell to a client. You can't just use words.
Yep.
Your actions have to demonstrate. And so sometimes, until you've had the time to show through actions who you are, whether that's personally or as a company, you're asking them to rely on faith.
Yep.
And that is what I do. And then I try to show the individuals on a consistent basis, look, what I know about you is that it's important for you to not be micromanaged. I know for you, you like autonomy over your role. Am I honoring those things that are important to you about your job? And for this particular employee, we were trying to figure out, where was she going to fit? She was one of those employees that we hired without the exact role because I knew she was a really good fit. She was highly competent. She was detail oriented, and she had some construction background. But we have since fit her into a role where she's working towards being a project engineer.
Awesome.
She's super excited about her role. She loves learning new things. But every step of the way, I showed her, we're going to figure it out. We're going to figure out what your role is. We're going to figure out how to keep you busy. We're going to get you the training that you need. And now she's super excited. She has strong direction, and she's been with me over a year now. And I think she thinks anybody that doesn't stay here is crazy because she's like, it had to be them and not necessarily, you or the company. Because I've worked hard to prove to her that I am who I say I am, and that this is a good company.
Here's an interesting piece. So I assume is she younger?
She is.
Okay. Millennial, Gen Z? I'm curious.
I think she's a millennial.
Okay. So I'm curious, have you had Gen Z as well? Like here is okay. So I'm curious, because the reality is, from a leadership standpoint, is leaders are here to serve their people. Like at least that's my perception of leadership. And so I'm curious for you, especially to knowing that there's different generations, and especially to a lot more of the older generation has typically been like, they're retiring. So a lot of millennials, Gen Z are starting to come into the industry. What's the difference between leading the older generation versus millennials and Gen Z, and how have you had to adapt? Because some of the language that you're using, I mean, one, kudos to you, because it's very intuitive, a lot of emotional intelligence that you like. A lot of the things that you're talking about, I honestly don't really hear in construction. So for me, I'm baffled, one, but then two, I'm like, this is awesome that you're going this route. So I'm just curious, what have you seen from a leadership standpoint, what it's like to lead the older generation versus millennials and Gen Z?
I think that there is a difference in work ethic, which is a hard. I need to still work on another word for that, because it's like an expectation situation. So work ethic from my generation would be, that if you're salaried, you would expect that you would work at least 50 hours a week. Because that you're getting the extra benefits of paid vacation and medical benefits and all of those things. And so from the way I went through my career, that was what was expected. And I know that I have people that have been with me they've been with this company up to 28 years. Then I have a few people that have only been here for a couple of years, and they're younger. So many of my superintendents worked through the old school time frame, and they were used to being yelled at They were used to being, I mean, just a completely different environment than what they have today. I would say the younger generations, not everyone, because I think it also depends on how you were raised and what you were exposed to, maybe even as early, what your earlier leaders were like. They tend to think certain things are part of the package and what they deserve as an employee. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just a difference in perspective. Look, all these things are part of your salary package. And that's true.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a reality. And you shouldn't really have to feel like you have to do extra to get what is your salary. So I had to shift my mindset, I think is the biggest thing. I appreciate being asked if someone can take a sick day. I also realize that the younger generation is going to tell me that they're taking a sick day. And the truth of the matter is that's their right.
Yeah.
Washington State made it their right to be able to tell me that they're taking a sick day. So I think what you have to do is learn, rather than look at it from a generational perspective, learn who the employees are as people and what's important to them, what makes them feel valued, what is important to them. And then you have to figure out how to adjust your own issues. Like, why does that bother me when they don't ask me for the time off?
That's a great question. Oh my
Yeah,
God, that's great.
It's like about me, because I came from a place where that's what I did. I used to tell my boss when I worked for Sierra Construction, I would tell him thank you for the time off when I would get back from vacation. That would never happen today.
They'd be like, "Hey, Tammy."
Yeah. It's just a completely different thing. But I like that we've changed.
Yep.
I like that we've come forward. I do think that being an employer is a privilege. And I don't know if everybody thinks that way. It's also kind of a thankless job.
Yeah.
I mean,
Why is it a privilege?
because you have the means to provide for other people. You can allow them to be able to put food on their family's table. That's a privilege. You can grow them. You can help them. You can get them training and advance them in their career. You can treat them different than they've ever been treated anywhere else, and they can use you as part of what makes their life better.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with what you're saying. Like, not there is this natural tendency, and it makes sense, because the thing is, especially as human beings, we want to compartmentalize things. We want to make sense of how the world is. So it's like, hey, we have older, young adults, and then youth, and then you have kids, and so it's just natural for us to just, okay, they're a part of this group. And I realize, because I've seen, I would say that the piece that I see more, and I'm sure likely I'm a millennial. I'm 31 years old, and I'm sure in 10, 20 years, my generation, just like every generation, is going to, like, we're like, hey, why are you bashing us, or why are you criticizing us? There's a cyclical aspect about it where we made, hey, like, oh, you guys have it easy, and all these sort of, like, that's probably going to happen. But the reality is, especially too for millennials and especially Gen Z, there's a lot of what I see sometimes on LinkedIn is folks just criticizing. It's like, hey, like you were saying, maybe entitled, all these, like, using all these specific descriptors. And in theory, like, is it wrong, or is it not true? Probably not. It's probably true. There is a level of entitlement, things like that, and that's just how we understand it. But the reality is that doesn't necessarily help you solve your people issue, because, like, at the end of the day, you're still working with these individuals, and I don't know how helpful it is to be able to say, hey, you're entitled, or all these sort of things. And they're like, oh, so you expect us to work at, I don't want to work at your company. And especially now knowing that there is a labor shortage, there is, less people coming into the trades, and, there's more. And then even to knowing how many recruiters there are out, construction recruiters. I mean, everybody's poaching there's just a lot of movement.
Right.
I think it's now, especially being more hypersensitive or aware of like, hey, how do I these are the cards that have been dealt. These are the folks. And maybe, like you said, there is a level of, I want to hone it into this specific individual. So I'm communicating in a language or in a way that they understand. But at the same time, my thought process too is I'm trying to figure out, okay, what is, and especially this conversation that we're having now, is what does the path forward look like for the construction industry, especially too right now we're recording this on Women in Construction Week, and especially talking about inclusion, things like that. I think that also includes other generations as well, and so I'm just curious, like, past anything you've shared up to this point, like how should leaders approach millennials, and especially Gen Z? Because I would say that's probably sometimes a bigger gap depending on the age difference from the executive to maybe somebody a little bit more junior in the company.
Well, the one thing that I do notice is that they come in maybe with less communication skills. And they would want to not necessarily, you want me to call those people? So that's definitely one of the things, that's a little bit different and challenging, which might feel like 101 as an employee to you, but it's just getting them past that. It's just sharing that, this is an expectation. In fact, I have to say sometimes when someone emails you, you need to answer them right away. Even if you're working on the problem, if you're, communication is super critical. And it's just taking it back a notch and saying, okay, this is just, it's not intentional. It's not malicious. They just don't know.
Yep.
And so you don't, it doesn't have to be about them. It has to be about your company. So we say, at Merit, communication is really important. It's one of our cornerstones. So we need to respond, even to our internal customers, even to our own employees. We need to respond immediately and let them know that you got the message, that you're working on it, and that you'll get back to them as soon as you have the answer. So it's just kind of thinking about it and saying, there's things that I really like about this employee. Mm-hmm. And that could be any age group. But if you're working with someone that is either Gen Z or millennial, you want to focus on the positives. You want to tell them on a regular basis why they're important to you as an employee, what value they bring. One of my employees, I'm constantly explaining how highly capable she is, how I know that I can give her anything and she will go the extra mile and figure it out and make it happen. So it's sharing what's good, and then it's teaching what needs to be taught, and just letting them know, as I said, that it's like, for me, I say it's a Merit thing. We need to, and I believe that no matter where they go from here, that they leave better. So I think that, how we deal with it is we as leaders, we have to change ourselves. We have to look at the positives of any individual and encourage them, lift them up. That's something that's very important to them. They want to hear that. I happen to be, I wish my role was chief encourager. I love that. It was great for me to come into the older generation, because they're used to not getting anything, not being told they're doing a great job, just assuming if they weren't fired that everything was okay. So I love sharing with them how proud I am of them. I love talking good about them in front of other people. I love, if we're at a project interview, saying the reality of what great employees I have, how I think they're second to none, what great problem solvers they are, all of those types of things. And it's real. That's really how I feel. But I love doing that for them so that they feel that I value them. It's really important to me.
Yeah.
And I just take that same approach that I have in my life across the board, regardless. And it's making people feel known and cared for and valued. I think that is just, who doesn't want that?
Yep.
And so if as a leader, if you can say part of my job is to do that,
Yep.
then you'll succeed. But if you think you're above that, or if you think that that's not an important part of being a leader, I just don't see I don't see success unless you've got people that you've hired specifically to do those
that,
roles, which is fine. I
Yeah.
mean, if it's not something that you love to do or doesn't feel like you could be good at it, then by all means get somebody that is, because I think it's a really important function.
That's awesome. So I'm curious what, because my wife is an encourager. She's just like, I mean, we'll be anywhere. Because my thing is, I'm definitely a heads down person. I'll go to the grocery store and let me just buy my thing. Okay, cool. My wife's like, hey, how's your day? He's like, oh, wait, I love that blouse. Or, I love your nails. Or like, and so for me, I'm just like, I just don't process the world that way. But my wife does. And I can just tell, she just like, you just see these individuals and just their face lights up. It's like, oh, somebody noticed me.
Yep.
Somebody saw me. And so I definitely do believe, although I do think most people can be encouraging, I do think it's also a superpower. So I'm sure that is, like you said, chief encouragement officer. I'm sure that's likely a gifting that you have, especially as a leader. But the reason I say that is like, my wife will regularly encourage me different things. She'll be like, hey, like, we just recently had our first child. She's like, hey, you're a great dad. And I'm like, okay, like I just kind of want to brush it off and just move on, like, okay, thanks. And then but sometimes she'll catch me and I'm like, wow, that was exactly what I wanted to hear. And so I say this to say, you mentioned some of the folks from the older generation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious what sort of impact, whether it's what you see or what you've heard, on your ability to encourage those who have been in the industry who, like you said, likely have had shouting matches, cussing out, all these sort of things, almost in the brink of probably punching somebody.
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen and what have you heard from like your approach to leadership and the impact it's having on your team?
Specifically, the superintendents that have been here for a long time and have experienced the old school methods, I think that they shared directly with me that, they really appreciate that it means a lot to them to hear that they've never heard that. I think at this point, I've been here 18 years, so I think at this point they do kind of expect it. But I think it sets us apart for sure. I mean, Why would you not want to work for someone who not only tells you that you're valuable, not shows you what they're good at? Like I will tell them, man, I can't believe that you solved that problem like that, and you brought a solution that's actually now going to help us on the next job. We were just talking in our staff meeting on Thursday about lessons learned, and our senior superintendent had several things that he wanted everybody else to know that he had just encountered and that he had just experienced. And our thing is like, we don't want to make a mistake, and so we don't want to make a mistake again, is what I meant.
Yep.
We do make mistakes, every one of us. So, but what I said to him is, that's why you're a leader, is because you care that you don't want everybody else to go through what you just went through, and you bring that back to the table and you share that with everybody. And, I appreciate that about you. He's one where, he finds it a little bit hard. He definitely doesn't just say thank you usually. Like he kind of shrugs it off. But but there was a time when he got his bonus without a conversation. And when I do bonuses, I have conversation. I share with him what I'm most proud of him over the year, etc. Well, when I didn't have a conversation with him, he let me know.
Wow.
I really, that matters to me. I really want to hear from you. I want to have a face-to-face conversation. After having that and knowing that I feel that way, he counts on that as part of who he is overall. He needs to hear that I value him and that I appreciate him and that this isn't just money coming your way. This is my gratitude.
Yeah, and the reality is money can be a big motivator for most. I mean, especially too, it's a part of your livelihood, all that sort of stuff. But it is some of those moments of like, hey, stopping, hey, saying, hey, outside of this, like, just so you know, I really value you as an individual. Thank you.
Yeah.
And sitting in that sometimes too, because depending on the individual, because like I said, I'm that way. I get squirmy. Somebody
Yeah.
says, I'm like, okay, cool. Let's focus. Let's redirect on something else. But the reality is, it does have an impact on me, a positive impact. And I'm sure there's folks, like you mentioned, in your company as well as in the industry who, especially too in the older generation, probably benefit from hearing that. Especially too, if you think about 20, 30, 40 years in the industry, and then somebody says, hey, I've never heard anybody say thank you for
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Oh, that's very real. And it was very normal for all of them, to just not have that be something that they heard. They might have heard an owner say something nice, like an owner of a project that they built, but not part of any of the company culture that they had been, whether it was here or at a different place prior.
Yeah. And one last thing, just like on the leadership piece, one of the things that you mentioned earlier, which I'm still like, in my mind just keeps wanting to go back to it. And so we'll see if this is something we want to expand on. But I love that the idea of like, hey, somebody else leaving, and if I'm disturbed, that's my problem. And well said. Like for me, like I resonate with that a lot. And I just know that. I mean, honestly, there are certain situations where I'm like, hey, like I realized if I'm disturbed, that's on me to figure out, okay, why? What is it that I'm holding on to? What I need to let go? And what sort of help or assistance do I need? And I say that because it's really, I've talked to different, not just construction leaders, but just different business leaders. And, they carry a lot of stuff, like from both, whether it's their projects or the clients or the team member or thinking about the future of the business or trying to put out all the fires. And it becomes a lot where you're just like, eventually it's a natural default to start blaming. Like, that's this person's fault. It's this, it's all this, all this. But I realize it's really empowering to be like, hey, it may be this person's fault, this situation, all these sort of things, but what's my part in it?
Yeah.
I feel like there's a level of ownership and like sigh of relief. And so I just would love to hear your general thoughts on that, because I feel like that thought likely came from experience of, hey, what's my part in this as a leader?
Well, I think the most important thing is when you lose someone that was valuable to you, you want to figure out, I don't want that to happen again. So what do I need to do differently so that I don't lose that next person? And yes, I mean, certainly it comes from experience, and it also comes from watching other people do it in a different way. That didn't make me feel good at all. I really didn't like it. I didn't feel good about, it'd be like, oh, if they want to leave, let them go. And basically kind of closing the door and making it seem like they're never welcome back here. I just think that's a mistake. If you have a person that provided a lot of value, loyalty is important. I'm not going to lie. That's really important to me. In fact, I think it's one of the ways that I've gotten as far as I have in my own career is by being loyal. But being loyal doesn't mean not having your own opportunities and not growing to your own potential. The greatest thing to me would be if somebody did go out, grow, find something that they couldn't have had here, that they bring back, and then they help us grow. And you're never going to get that if you when they leave, you treat them poorly.
You kick them out.
Yeah.
Yep.
And tell them, slam the door on the way out. So because I've usually invested in people, because I've usually, I do have a personal relationship with everyone that works here. I just don't want to burn a bridge. I want to leave the door open, and I would say pretty much every employee, if they left, from a situation where they went on to do something different or better, I still am on very friendly terms with all of them. Run into them, sometimes text if something like reminds me of something from before. I'm going out for happy hour next week with my previous controller because I miss her.
Yeah.
When she left, she gave me 6 weeks, and we both cried a lot of times during those 6 weeks. But I knew that she was doing something that it was what was best for her. So.
Yeah. I love the direction that we've gone with this podcast so far, mainly because I'm like, the people side is, yes, what you build is, buildings and incredible structures, but it's the people at the end of the day who end up doing it. And it's like, hey, do you want to build a place that people either love to work or just see it as a job? I'm just here to just do my thing and get out. It's like, you spend so much of your life at work. Why not make it the best experience? And so with that said, so you mentioned you took on some of the financial role when, the controller, the individual transitioned, but you mentioned you have a background in accounting, and I saw that on LinkedIn. You alluded to Sierra Construction. So I'm curious, was that your intro into construction, or did you have an intro to construction background? What's the story there? How did you land at Sierra, and then eventually the sequential roles from there?
Yeah, Sierra was my first construction role, and I had already had a background in just general admin, done some accounting, small offices types of things. Not a lot of jobs, not much of a career before I went to Sierra, and I went to work for Roger Collins there, the owner, to do the racetrack, Emerald Downs, I think it's called, which was a huge project, and that was really exciting. And I was kind of the admin person and the accounting person on the project. And
Sierra's a GC, right?
Yes, yes, they are a GC. They're a non-union GC. They're known for tilt-ups. They do a lot of that. Roger was an employer that wanted everybody for, one of the things he said was, when you leave here, I want you to always feel like this is the best job you ever had. So he was a person that knew about that way back then. And a lot of the ways that I have been are because of the principles he had for his company. But as a result of going there, working on that project, and then he moved our family up to Redmond after that because we lived down in Pierce County.
Okay, yep.
And then I worked for him for a total of 7 years and was eventually the head accounting person for him. I learned so much about job cost accounting from him. I never really had any field time with my employment with him, but I learned everything important about job cost accounting, which it's a niche. It's different than regular accounting, and he was super generous with his knowledge.
Yeah.
And he was the kind of person that wasn't really interested in if you were a man or a woman. He was interested in your loyalty. He was interested in your capacity. He was interested in how hard you would work. What would you do when faced with something? Did you strive to be better, to be more? And and that was just who I was, and he was just a person who really watched for things like that. And so he invested in me, and I've been eternally grateful. One of the, things I feel like is I never would have been prepared eventually for ownership had I not had that time with him. He was a man of character, and it was very important to me. And I said that when I interviewed here, I want to work for a man of character, which is a very important thing for me.
Is he still involved in the business?
I have watched and sort of followed, and for a while I kept in touch with him, just letting him know, hey, I just wanted to thank you. I want you to know that you've helped me prepare for this. I think he's pretty much retired now. I think he's in his 70s, and I think he's got two beautiful girls and a wife, and probably grandkids and all of that stuff. So yeah, he has had people that I was aware of that have gone on to be the president, et cetera. So I think he's pretty much, he's done. They probably still call him when they need something really important that only he can provide. But yeah, I don't think he's really in the day to day.
Okay. So you mentioned, a cumulative of about, because it was like Sierra, and then you went to was it a subcontractor, electrical contractor? And so it's interesting. You went from GC, then you went to the sub side, and this is like a business manager. I saw that role. What is that? What does that mean? Like, is it just involved in just office stuff? And I'm just curious, or is it back office, or what is it?
No,
what does it imply?
It was a business manager was more than an office role, because I was looking at the projections, making marketing decisions, looking at. I also did the payroll. I also paid all of the bills. But sort of just helping guide. Yep. I dealt with the permitting processes. It was kind of sometimes we had as many as 3 people in the office, depending on the ups and downs. Yep. But I learned more about the subcontractor side, which I think is a really critical thing. If you're going to be a successful general contractor, you need to understand what it's like to be a subcontractor. You need to understand when you're making things more difficult for your subcontractor. You need, I learned there how much I wanted to be team members with my subcontractors. It was really important as a general to be good to the people that do 60% of your projects. Yep. So their work is your work. It's your finished product. So, I think I learned during that time just how to be a good team member to subcontractors.
So then eventually, so Sierra there, and then you go back to Sierra for a little bit. Is that right? Was that
no?
Oh, no. So you were at Sierra, and then there, and then Merit.
That's right.
So what's the story at Merit? How did you land there? You mentioned that you wanted to work for a man of character, but what's the story that eventually got you there?
I needed to do something different. I was at one of those times where I kind of described to you earlier about employees get there, where I had been there for 7 years and I was ready to do something else. I wanted to stretch myself. And so I applied for 2 jobs, which at that time, it was still the newspaper. It was online, but also they had the newspaper. So I applied for 2 different jobs, and one was through directly to the company, and the other one was to a headhunter or whatever they call it now.
Yeah, recruiters.
Yeah. Back then they called it a headhunter. So,
yep.
And it turns out they were the same job. And so the recruiter knew Roger. So he called Roger and because he saw my resume, and he was like, what do you think about this gal? Is it worth my time to interview her? And Roger had positive things to say, I'm assuming, because I'm here. And then I also spoke with Len Zarelli, the owner of Merit. And so I was like, this feels like destiny, because those were the only 2 jobs I was interested in, and they were the same job.
Wow.
So, I started here as the controller. We were using the same software I had used at Sierra. All of the experience I had gained from Sierra was put into play immediately here. And and that was in 2007. The software we were using wasn't being utilized the way it should have been. So all of a sudden, instead of just printing out reports, the project managers could get in and see their costs. They could get in and see the contracts that they were dealing with. Again, transparency for me is really important.
Yep.
I don't want them to rely on accounting to share the documentation. I want them to get in and know where their jobs are at. That's super critical.
Yep.
So that was the way Roger ran Sierra, and I think that is the right way, for your employees to be able to see what's happening at all times. If you're going to hold them accountable for it, they need to know what's happening within the jobs. So then in 2010, I was pretty much running the day-to-day operations of the company, kind of more toward a business manager again. And by 2014, I became a partner. And again, none of that would have happened without the generosity of Len. Again, not a person who was interested in whether or not I was male or female, but very much interested in what was I like, what was I willing to do, what did I demonstrate to him, was I loyal, all of those types of things. And he made me a partner in 2014, and I had purchased the company completely by 2020.
Wow. So what's the process then for becoming a partner? You said that he made you partner. Was that like, was there at some point in your career at Merit, like where like, hey, I would love, that's what you kind of like set your sight on, or was it something, what's the founder's name you said?
Len.
Len. Okay, Len.
Len Zarelli.
Len. So was it Len who brought it up? I'm just curious, how did that whole process? Because the reality is like, if a team member joins a company, I don't always assume they're going to become the owner. So I'm just curious for you, what was that process of eventually, becoming a principal and then an owner? Was it something you started or he started or kind of both? Or
I feel like it's something that I started. I think in your career, you're like always reaching for the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I saw that as the next thing, as some form of ownership, and I saw it as something to strive for. And I think certain people, that's really important to them, to always be like working towards the next thing. It's also not important to some people, and we need every different type of personality in what we do. Yep. It's great if people are really happy where they are and they want to do, what they're doing now. But I saw that as something to strive for and to go for. And so as I developed my relationship with Len, as he would say, sometimes I would come back and ask him questions about more of the field side, the operations side of things. And he wasn't necessarily, he didn't give me the answers. He would ask me other questions.
Love it.
If I had known the right questions to ask to begin with, then I would know the answer. So that we did that for, I don't know, at least a year. And then I have what I call the Book of Len. And it's different things. It's either his email answers to me. It's little quotes that he says that I think are funny. It's lessons that I learned. Sometimes it's just my own handwriting telling me what he said when I asked him something. That guides me still. But he started spending the kind of time and investment where it was like, I was looking around and there wasn't anybody else that was looking to take it on. There wasn't another employee that I could see. There wasn't necessarily the way that they had it structured, because his brother was also an owner. The way they had it structured, the next generation wasn't going to take it. It gets complicated by the time you get to the third generation, and there's so many people. So it just seemed like it was a possibility. And so I started talking to him about it. And we talked about it for a long time. And I started to see, and he started to develop sort of a plan of action for me of what I would need to do, what I would need to know. I tended to be more on the side that he was familiar with, which was the legal side, the finance side, and his brother Carl was estimating and more operational. So Len knew I would need to get out into the field if I was going to be able to do this someday on my own. And so on one of my first projects as principal in charge, I went straight from being in the office to principal in charge of a very large project, but a repeat client that I had a great relationship with, that believed in me, that had been supportive of the shift. And I went out into the field on that project, and it was a 2-year project.
Wow.
So during those 2 years, I learned everything that I needed to know. Painfully, I learned it. I'm really good at maybe reading things. I didn't always know what the problem was, but I knew there was an issue, and I knew who the parties were that were having an issue. So then I would bring the situation as I saw it, which was more a perception of a people issue, and I would share it with Len, and then Len would share with me what I needed to go back and find out. Eventually, I got to the place where I knew the questions I needed to ask, and then I would know the answer. I still brought the situation back to Len, but I had all the answers that I knew he was going to ask, and I would tell him what my plan of action was, make sure that he agreed with me, because he still had so much more experience than me. Almost always we were on the same page. What he was great at, then he would say, well, did you think about this? Or did you think about this? Making sure I had seen every aspect. And you asked, how did ownership come into play in its eventuality? Like, once you got to that place where you both agreed that this was going to happen, my first portion of the company, he gave to me as an equity, like a sweat equity situation. So he provided a path for me that if he had not provided that path, I would never have been able to be in the position I'm in today. So he saw something in me and believed in me and provided a way for me to continue the company. So my responsibility to him, my loyalty, and my concerns always are to honor him. I believe legacy only happens if it continues.
Yep.
And so my job is to carry his legacy forward. We honor our past, and we, are excited by our future. We've made a lot of shifts. Being a woman-owned business, it's very different. But we are founded still on character and integrity, and the skill set of the people that have been here before me and that have come since I've come on. Our people are second to none, and they are incredible at their craft. The people that are in the field that are building the buildings, just absolutely really, really good at their jobs.
Len sounds pretty awesome.
He is a great man. I've been very blessed to be, to know and to work for and to serve really good quality men. Because when I started in construction, women were not really in leadership roles per se, and they certainly weren't out in the field. So it was a different environment. And I really, truly believe that we've made a lot of progress, but it's still definitely out there. The whole, believing maybe that men are better at things than women. And I want to say that that's true in some cases. I also believe that women are better than men at some things. The important part is that we're better together.
Yep.
When I go on a project, like a first meeting I take an estimator with me usually, and ideally I take a superintendent if I can. We all see things differently, I'm there to hear what the client really cares about and what the client really knows.
Yep.
Because I have found that sometimes my team members, they're technical and they start figuring out how to solve the problems, and they might miss something that is really important to the client. So I just believe that men and women together in the construction environment and in most environments are the ideal situation because we bring different strengths.
Yep. Yeah, you're speaking my language, especially around that, because like it's interesting because I just had the podcast that will be released prior to this. It's another now woman-owned company, and she had a similar path where she had a few different partners, and there were men, and she's like they just wanted to find the right person for the role, and so the hard part is for me is especially right now, like I said, we're recording this on Women in Construction Week. I do think that we should create more and more opportunity for women in construction and more opportunities, a path for growth, for leadership, things like that. And also, to understand that maybe not everybody, including men, want to be in those roles. Maybe not. And so it's like really leaning on different strengths and things like that. And so the thing I loved about what you shared, at least so far with your experience in Sierra, as well as here at Merit, is like, which I think sometimes can be overlooked because there are toxic people out there. There are jerks. There are assholes. There are condescending. There are people who sexually harass. Those exist 100%. And there's also those unsung folks like Sierra, like Len,
Yep.
who behind the scenes, like outwardly, they just heads down. They're just trying to do what they can with their people. But there is no sort of like, hey, like there are also, men who do things like really well. They don't look at me, based on race or gender or anything like that.
Right.
They just, hey, you want to do this? Let's figure it out together. And so that's it for me sometimes. And like I said, this is as a male speaking, the messaging can sometimes feel a little divisive when the goal is, like you said, hey, we all bring our own flavor and color. And when you mix this together, you get an incredible product.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with that. And I also agree with you. I mean, there was a time there with like Me Too movement and other stuff that's going on. It's like, it felt like you couldn't say anything nice about a man for a while because everybody just was like the mob mentality over it. And my messaging has been the same since the beginning. I am so grateful for the really good, generous men that I have had during my career that have invested in me, because without them, I wouldn't have this opportunity. So I think it's important. And what I always say, like if I'm speaking, it's like you need to have mentors. You should have a variety of types of mentors. And if you're working for someone or you're being mentored by someone who isn't investing in you, you're putting the time in and you're doing your best and they're not giving back to you, you're not in the right spot.
Yep.
And there are so many good quality people, because there are also assholes that are women.
Yep. Oh.
There are women that get to the top and then forget everything that they had to go through to get there and then treat everyone underneath them poorly because they're like, now I'm in a position of power. I don't think anybody has a patent on, being a jerk, every race, gender, and creed. But I think the important part is finding the right person to be your mentor and not giving up. Believe in yourself and know that you deserve somebody who's investing back into you. Loyalty is awesome, but it should be reciprocal. And it's great to give yourself to your job, but your job should be giving something back. The person that you're working for should see that you're valuable, and they should, take care of you financially. They should take care of you just from an encouragement perspective. They should be lifting you up. What we do, like I've said, is hard. So it's not that you're not going to go through ups and downs. It's not that you're not going to be bummed sometimes when something doesn't work out, and, no boss can be perfect all the time. But I read or heard something recently, and people are like, what is the most important thing as a boss? I believe one of the biggest things is your employees want you to be happy. They want to know that you are in it for the right reasons, that you're generally a happy person. People want to work for a leader that is good to be around. And so if you are having a bad day or you can't be good to be around that day, maybe it's not a good day to be at work. Or go take a walk or do whatever you need to do
Go on vacation.
yeah, do whatever you need to do to be able to come back and be your best self, because they're looking to you as a leader, like you brought up earlier. They're going to remember if you say something that you regret. So, we're definitely not perfect, but being a leader is such an important thing. And I think people also need to remember, you don't have to be the owner to be the leader. You don't have to be in management to be the leader. Everyone should be thinking of themselves as a leader and carrying themselves as a future leader. I just think that's a really important thing.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting even too, being aware of what you say. Like I remember maybe 6-7 months ago, maybe a little bit longer, me and my wife were in a marriage counseling session. And one of the things that our counselor said, because my thing is, I'm a reactionary guy. Like things happen, things can irritate me. My wife definitely is a lot more steady. And so the thing, he's like, Jonathan, just know the most important thing that you need to know, and I think this applies to leaders, is you can never unsay something. Once you've said it, it's out there. Now you can say sorry, you can apologize, but just so you know, you can't unsay anything. And for me, the whole analogy of biting your tongue, like, has definitely, whether it's in marriage or in business or just in all aspects of life, I'm hyper aware of that, because I realize people can hold on to these things, and it could be, there's, who knows, hopefully not, but maybe in 20, 30 years, somebody would be like, hey, you said something to me that really impacted me, and I'm just bringing this up to you. I'm like, oh my word, this is 20, 30 years later, but you're bringing this up now. I know that happens, but the reality, especially as a leader, is like you're saying, figure out what those mechanisms are for you to have some sort of outlet to just like, hey, I just need to go walk for like an hour and I'll be back and I'll be in a better space. Let's just pause here, because the reality is you can never unsay anything.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of like what they say with the internet. Once you've posted it, it's out there.
It's out there.
And that, if you say something that hurts someone and they replay that in their head, it's true. You can't get that back. And sorry is great, but it doesn't make the actual impact of that go away.
Yep, for sure. So 2014, you become principal. And like you said, then right after you take on this 2-year project that you mentioned, about what do the sequential years after that project is done, you mentioned there's a lot of lessons learned, but I'm curious, what else was formative in helping you eventually lead up to, eventually being the sole owner by 2020? Like what were some of the other steps? I know you mentioned there's like the Book of Len, and there's a lot of insights and wisdom like that. I'm curious, what else do you think was formative between the 2014 to 2020 area that was like, okay, it's time to do this?
I think I knew that, somebody needed to carry it on. So once I had I was a partner, I needed to sort of figure out what else is there, what have I not had experience with. Len and I worked on a lot of things just to make sure that I was up to speed. I'm trying to think of, so negotiating a contract. I had a contract on the Mountaineers project, which I think is up behind us.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful building, really dedicated people to that cause, people that loved it. The first time I negotiated a contract myself, there were 3 lawyers on their board, and that's who I got to negotiate with. So it was, and Len didn't come in. It was like, you've got to know that contract inside and out, and you've got to know what you can let go of and what you can't, what's non-negotiable. And so going through that was a huge process. And then seeing the project through. So at the beginning, when you're talking about what's important in the contract and what you can live with and what you can't, and you're talking to 3 lawyers who are protecting their own interests at every step, and I'm trying to explain to them who we are, why this is not going to come into play, and their answer was, we only need a contract when you need a contract, which is basically you've got a problem and you could be the greatest company in the world, but if we need this contract, this is how it's going to look. So it was just really tense. And not a fun way to start a contract. But we built that building, and all the things I said about who we were shown and demonstrated. And I was lucky enough to have, beautiful letters of reference written. And in fact, we will take a client to that facility, and they will, the attorneys, Jeff Lawrence in particular, will come and talk to them about who we are, because it means so much more coming from him than it coming from me. And he will always say, anyone can call me anytime and I will always be a reference. So knowing that I went through that difficult thing, and then to come out the other side and to have proven it to be true, I just think that's a huge thing. Every time you go through something, it doesn't scare you anymore. You've been there, you've done that, you know it's possible, you have the skills. It might not be exactly the same, but you've gained the skills to be able to figure it out. Of course, we've run into problems on the projects, so those are always a huge learning lesson. How do we do this differently? What do we need to do so that this never happens again? Every time we came up against something like that. And then just the more I went out on the projects, the more I learned about everything to do with the construction aspect. I can go now by myself to a new project. I can go to a problem on a project, whatever that looks like, having been here for 18 years, and always having been in construction. There's not as much that could come up that I don't know something, that's going to carry me through. And if so, I have a staff that I've surrounded myself with people that any weakness I have, they have that strength. So I'm lucky enough my son works for me. He came up through the, working here in the summer in high school, became a journeyman. He has been a foreman. He's been a project engineer. He's been a superintendent. So I have the other side of the world of construction right there. I also have been working with most of these people since I've started. I know what their strengths are. I know I can ask them about anything. So surrounding yourself with the right people is pivotal and critical to being successful. If there was someone here that didn't believe in me as a leader, that wouldn't be a good fit. It's another thing that, I don't require a lot, except, that we have mutual respect, and that individual is going to be respectful to every sub, all of those types of things that they carry out the value system that we have. I'm trying to think of any other specific issues. There was one thing that came up that was a pretty big deal. I didn't know what a big deal it was at the time because I was still in the early phases. There was a structural component of the project that we were working on. And the superintendent that we had at the time wanted to solve the problem without the without going directly to everybody that needed to be consulted. And that helped me learn and understand we can bring solutions to the design consultants, but we're never going to make a decision. We're going to bring solutions to them, and they're going to make the ultimate decision. Design consultants are every bit, if not more, critical than our subcontractors. And we're lucky enough to work with quite a few of them that care about our solutions. They take our solutions into consideration and work with us to solve a problem. But I learned during that time with Lynn's response to that situation that was something I could never, ever let happen. We don't make decisions that design consultants should be making. We don't draw up something. We have a conversation. We can be part of the solution, but those are the people that have the degrees, that understand the loads, that understand all of the things. We carry those things out.
Yep.
We don't decide them. And so that's always something I'm always watching for. And I'll always, say to the guys, why are we making that decision? What did the structural engineer say? It's good to be a team member, but it's critical to let the people that should be making the decisions make them.
Yep. And put it back, because it's like, hey, we're staying in our lane, and you're trying to beat, the reality is the client's bringing you all in to deliver on the service. So, hey, let's all do our part really well, so it turns out really good for the client. So I guess in 2014 then, did you figure that the path was going to be for you to eventually be the sole owner, or is it just, like, I'm just curious, like, or was there eventually down a few years, 2018, 19, you're like, hey, I think I might take over the whole thing?
No, I think it was always the plan.
Okay.
I think that's why it took us as long as it did to get to the situation where, okay, we're going to give you, this certain amount of sweat equity. And at that time, my salary froze. I didn't get bonuses anymore. It's like sweat equity is real, and
You're a part owner now.
Yeah, exactly. So, luckily we didn't experience a loss, or I would have been sharing in that as well, because that's another part people don't understand once you have ownership.
Yep. It's not always.
No, it's not
glamour.
always. Yeah, it's definitely not always glamour, and you're not rolling up, with the big money,
What's up, guys?
Yeah,
Like, no.
yeah, yes, we did bring in a lot of revenue, but we spent a lot of money as well. It's not profit. It's what the revenue was. But I think we always knew we had an agreement when I first came into a partnership of what the game plan was, how long it would take, and had everything pretty much written out at that time. And then, I guess it's important to let you know that once I had this thing that I had worked so hard and having part ownership, I was terrified to be the sole owner. As being a business owner, there are so many decisions. You talked about some of the things that, the stuff that keeps you up at night is making sure everybody has enough work and making sure you can pay payroll and, the risk involved in some of the things that we do when, a crane is involved, or, we've peeled back a couple things down to some bare structural components that I'm like, let's get, some stability back in there. It's just that one night, tomorrow is going to bring all the things that are going to make you feel more comfortable again. But it wasn't an easy decision. Like, I was kind of going to be okay if I was just part owner, it was like sharing in that responsibility and having a team was much easier than making the decision and going through with the decision to be the sole owner. It can be hard to have partners. There's a lot of difficulty that comes with that. And if you're not on the same page, it can tear a business apart. But it was a scary decision. I had to be brave and courageous, and you do have to be brave and courageous to be a business owner. And I'm not saying that because I'm not patting myself on the back at all. I just letting you know I was terrified, and I had to talk myself into it again and again. luckily for me, Len said, I will always be here. Like, I am here for your success. Like, he believes the same, that legacy only is legacy if it continues in your absence. So it's in his interest, not financially, but simply from, his legacy. It's in his best interest for him to be there for me. There's never, ever been a time that I haven't asked, can I call you? Or I haven't sent him an email that he hasn't answered, immediately.
Yeah.
And he still always has the answers. He still always can prop me back up if I'm feeling low or down or this is really hard. So I think that's another thing that's really important as a business owner, to have somebody like that that has been through it, that can be like, yeah, you talked about things being cyclical, easy earlier, and what we do is sow that always. And there's going to be ups and downs. And so having somebody to prop you up, or just complain to, like sometimes you just need to complain, and you can't complain to your employees.
Yep.
But you should have somebody that can just be like, yeah, that sucks.
Yeah. And then be like, all right.
Yeah,
Get back into
exactly.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where I think maybe things like peer groups or things like that sometimes are helpful, because
Agreed.
it's, because I mean, even too, sometimes with like the marriage situation too, sometimes like, yes, I can dump on my wife, and sometimes I'm like, I probably should not put this weight on her either. And so so I think having those dynamics are really helpful. But, during like, and I mentioned this in a few podcasts already, I mean, Seattle was known as Crane City. There was a lot of construction here happening, like the 2016, 17, 18, it's just 19 was just booming. But you said you took over in 2020. So you take over the company, become sole owner in 2020, then pandemic happens.
Yeah.
So what was that season like?
That was definitely one of the hardest things I have been through in my career. And, it was just constantly like, all right, I need to focus on this. I need to learn what this means. There were things that were called essential. So my life revolved around figuring out how to have my projects be essential, so that we could keep people working, so that we could continue to bill, so that we could, be an ongoing concern. It was very scary from the perspective of, at first, we didn't know, what does it mean if you get COVID on a job site? We had our employees bringing in their thermometers from home. You couldn't get everything. It's like, we find out on a Friday that if we want to be working on a Monday, we have to have these 16 things on every job site.
Wow.
We couldn't get everything. So it's like, well, I think my mom has one of those kinds of thermometers. And I'm serious.
Wow.
That's what we did. We figured out how to get hand wash stations. I had a pivotal employee at that time, which was my sister, and she made all those things happen in the background, and she figured out how to get us up to speed so we could keep going. So then the first time you get an actual case of COVID on a job, we had to wipe down everything, we had all of these things. And then you had employees that were scared, not my employees, but employees that were from another company. They didn't want to work back on the site because there was a COVID incident that had happened. And there were just so many things to deal with. But eventually we got sort of desensitized to it, and it wasn't as frightening because we understood how to deal with each thing as it came. I was grateful we weren't in the hospitality business, because that was such a nightmare for that line of work.
Yep.
But that was my key, was simply making sure that we were working on essential projects, and then how to make them essential. In certain situations, if you had an opening on a job that made it more dangerous, it could be essential until until that opening was closed. Yep. So there were some things, we had a daycare that we were working on, so that was automatically essential. certain things that we had going, but then also it was like our livelihood and everything depends on it. We also had the PPE loan during that time, which I spent every single penny on my employees. We were able to donate some work. We worked on a church during that time, and I used the PPE loan to donate the labor for that church. So I just did a lot of learning, a lot of pivoting, a lot of, come home and have a glass of wine, like as I walked in the door. It was just a lot there, and I was scared because I didn't know how long will this last? How long can I keep everything going? Then after that, it was figuring out material procurement. It was just a lot. And I think we had a team that we all worked together to figure out whatever it takes. Whatever it takes is what we're going to do, because we all knew we worked for each other. Everybody stepped up. Everybody stepped into whatever they could do to make it happen. I don't know if you were tuned into when the federal unemployment and the state unemployment were happening. Many people could make more money on unemployment than they could make working. Wasn't a real good system. I didn't lose a single employee during that time. Not one person took time off. We rarely even got anybody that got COVID. We rotated who could be here when in the office. Every single person got a laptop, and we learned how to do Teams. It was a wild, crazy time. But I think what it showed me was, wow, we can come together, we can make all of this happen, and we are resilient, and we are scrappy. And I was proud of the way we handled it. It wasn't easy, but it was all good to know what we were capable of and how fast we could maneuver if we needed to. Worst time ever to be the sole owner of a company.
Well, and that's my thought is, like you mentioned, like, hey, if I'm part owner prior to that, it's like, I'm cool with that. Let's figure out how to make this work. And then you mentioned you're having to psych yourself into, okay, all right, I'm going to do this. And you do it. And then all of a sudden, all right, cool. Hey, pandemic.
Yep. That's exactly how it was.
And then supply chain issues. And then just all these, just the economy was, it still is, like, it seems like it's starting to trend in the right direction. But I can only imagine what that's like, especially too, like, dealing with the fear of, like, hey, the weight's on your shoulders now, and then you add this additional weight now of this pandemic. So I guess, like, in 2020, obviously we're in 2026 now. Was there like a certain point or a season where you're like, hey, I feel like I'm getting my legs under me now? Was it 21, 22? Like, what eventually started to give you some sort of, like, hey, we can do this. We have a resilient team. If we have our back against the wall, we're going to break that wall down. Like, I'm just curious, was there a specific moment or season or something where it's just like, okay, we can do this?
As we were going through it, I had no doubt. We just stepped up and dealt with it every minute. I think the hardest part was when it was technically over, but we were still dealing with all the ramifications and trying to figure out how to deal with delays, whose responsibility is that, what's fair to owners, what's fair to subcontractors. That type of stuff took us for sort of a second nosedive. And if you asked me when have I started feeling comfortable, 2026.
Wow.
We're in a position where we have a good backlog. We're in a position where we have all the right people in all the right spots. I would have said, 2024-ish had I not lost those two critical employees, because that was another dip. So yeah, I would say we all feel really good and really strong and really solid. I'm realistic but I'm also positive.
Yeah.
So, as we've carried through, like we run lean. We can make it through a lot of things. But I'm in a position now where we're growing and we're growing at the right pace with the right people. And that growth has been sustained. 2025, our campaign was built for growth. And I said at the beginning of 2025, basically, I told my marketing manager, I'm basically trying to manifest this because I don't really feel it. And that was the reality.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know what? In a time when things feel hard, you have to step up and be brave. You have to have big faith. So when I asked myself what my word was going to be for 2026, it was like, I'm going to double down on growth because it's working. And I don't want to stop focusing on controlled growth and making my decisions based on controlled growth. 2027 might be different, but I don't usually repeat something. But I was
What
like,
does controlled growth mean? What do you mean by when you say that?
controlled growth is when you add a person that you don't add another person until you've acclimated, sorry about that, acclimated the person to the Merit way of doing things. They have soaked in the culture. They can run a job now without having to be with other experienced Merit employees because they know how to do that. We are able to sustain the payroll of having another person. Controlled growth also means if I bring someone on, I expect to be able to take care of them going forward. I need to have enough work going forward that that person hasn't lost their job. So there's a lot of things that go into it. You need to be able to perform the same level of quality with the new people that have come in. You need to ensure that every project looks and feels the same to the client, regardless of the staff that they have. So it's just being really intentional about growth. When people talk about being one of the fastest growing companies, I'm like, keep that far away.
Why is that?
Because I think that's a recipe for failure.
To go out of business.
Yeah, you can't control the quality when you have people that don't necessarily even understand the culture and what the goals are, what are the values, and it takes a while to learn whether or not that employee is a fit and whether they've bought in to who you are and that they work for each other like everyone else that you've brought into the team. So I just think it's really important to do it at a pace that you can be certain that they're now a Merit employee.
Yeah. Well, and I think too with growth, it's like you want to make sure that, because I mentioned this actually in the previous pod as well, like, growth at all costs comes at a huge cost. Huge, especially in construction, knowing it's one of the most risky. I mean, the restaurant industry and construction are the ones where people come in and they go out just as quick. But in construction, especially too, you start seeing the numbers, the dollar amounts, and you're like, okay, and then all of a sudden you're over leveraged, and then things just start caving in. It's like, all right, well, we gotta shut down. But the thing though is, with regards to growth is, because like you mentioned earlier in this conversation, you want to continue to create opportunities for your team, because hopefully the goal isn't like, hey, okay, I'm done with my season at Merit. It's like, no, we're graduating to that next role, to that next opportunity. So you want to grow with that. And also too, you want to grow in a way that honors those that are here, that have been here, as well as those that are about to join, so as to not eventually be like, hey, we have to let this person go, all these sort of things. So it's interesting because I feel like growth, especially in like, as a business owner, entrepreneur, it's like, it just sounds great, but the reality is you have to understand what kind of growth you're chasing. And I'm glad that you used the word like controlled growth, because there is like a level of wisdom and awareness of like, hey, we're not going to come crashing and burning just to chase this number, this accolade of being the fastest, or all these sort of. We just want to honor the people that we work with, honor the clients, and grow at the pace that the market and our company is able to take on, and then just continue to add pieces from there.
Yeah, for sure. I feel really strong that it's important to make sure that you understand that the people that you've brought on can now act in the same manner that the people that have been here for 20 years. I think what you said about, honoring the employees that are here, you don't want your employees that are here to have to be, taking care of mistakes because we, brought people in and they don't have the same skill set. It's like we need a little bit of time to get them up to speed. And so they can't just be on their own running work and disappointing clients or whatever else. You have to invest in them and complete that investment, complete that culture immersion before you're ready to take on the next person.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot more that I definitely want to cover, but as we get ready to wrap up the conversation for today, one of the topics I love, and at least from afar, I've noticed that you guys really put some intentionality on, is like marketing, branding, and just the overall vibe that you portray Merit as. And especially for me, like being in marketing, like typically in construction, especially to knowing there are a lot of technical people. It's like, hey, general contractor, these are the services we offer. Versus when so I've heard of Merit for maybe it was around 2020, 2021. Because I had a friend that worked here for a little bit, EJ O'Donnell. He was here for a season. And
great guy.
Yeah, love EJ. Love his energy.
I, in fact, just sent him something on Instagram this morning that he's going to think is funny about a running club.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because he runs the Tacoma Run Club. Really, he's a part of. He's a part of a lot.
Yes, he
EJ's
is.
Awesome. But it's interesting because Merit got on my radar there, and I'm like, oh, let me go take a look at your website. I'm like, oh wow, that's really intentional branding, and like, and then even walking here and just seeing obviously this wall, and just there's a certain vibe or aesthetic that I get, and I assume it's really intentional because even I think the last thing I noticed was the update with your logo. How for the longest time the M was disconnected. There's a little bit of a gap.
Yep.
And then now you've closed that. So maybe we start there. What does that mean? And then maybe if you want to expand more on just your overall thoughts on just marketing or branding, because I do think it's incredibly important, but obviously I'm the wrong person to say it as a marketing person, but I'm just curious from your perspective as an executive, how do you see that?
So the change in our branding, I knew I was going to do in 2020. So we had always had a closed circle at Merit, and it had always been owned by the Zarelli family. And I thought it was important to signify a shift. And so I broke the circle sort of as saying, we're going into something new, and there was a loss there. And so it was open.
Yep.
You could look at it in a lot of different ways and, say we're open to new opportunities or whatever, but the intention was to demonstrate that the Zarelli family was separated. And I wanted to be successful, and I felt like if I'm still a going concern in 2025, I'll rebrand in 2025 and I'll close the circle again. And that's because now the Birklid family is carrying on Len Zarelli's legacy. And, Jimmy's Len's father, and Len carried on Jimmy's legacy. So that is why we closed, and we shifted to blue because I didn't like the red. It didn't feel like me. It feels like an angry color. It's harsh, and I wanted it to feel more sort of P&W.
Yep.
And so we picked the navy blue and white oak and like a gray. We've always had a gray that, which is kind of an industrial, feels construction-y. So I think marketing is so important, and I think you might have come across us at that time because we didn't have really a presence online aside from our website prior to 2020. So when I took over as of January 1, 2020, we went at it hard. And I felt like it helped me focus on something during COVID.
Yeah.
We really identified who we were during that time and spent a lot of time sharing with everybody who we were. I think marketing is everything, a way you can reach a future potential client and demonstrate who you are and what it might be like to work with you. Branding is so important to me, that everything stay the same, that you be consistent so that those things are recognizable to others when they see that. And I think it's important for us all to use our branding every opportunity. Every time we talk about something on social media, we've always got our branding there. Marketing our company and marketing our brand. And brand is more than a look. Brand is who you are to me. It's, for us, it's the language of built on character. Everything that you'll see on our website demonstrates that we're built on character, that we have exceptional people. It demonstrates that our mission, which is to build the future of our communities, and we do that by, having the right people and doing the right thing.
Yep.
Everything that we talk about in our marketing will stand behind that brand. It will support that brand. It will hold that brand up and show that our actions match our words, and our words are our branding.
Yep. Yeah, well, and I've heard it said too with like branding, like a definition is like the gut feeling that you get from, let's say, a company in this case. And that's why even for me, I'm hyper aware to these things as it being in that space. And that's why even for me, I'm like, there's a lot of intentionality in all these there's a lot of little details, but it does paint a bigger picture. That's why when you walk into a Chick-fil-A, it's different than when you walk into McDonald's or when you walk into Chipotle. And like, there's a lot of intentionality in the colors and the way it feels, the way you experience it, because they're trying to communicate a story directly and indirectly. And so I think in the same way, in my opinion, I think I do think like marketing, especially branding, because branding is also the identity, it's who you are. But I think that's the competitive advantage, mainly because if you put yourself side by side amongst other contractors who do the same exact thing, okay, great. But what makes you different? I feel like that's where it's like, well, this is what we do, but this is who we are.
Exactly.
And that's naturally what we're drawn to. There's a reason why some people reach for Nike over Adidas or this brand. It's not to say that one is wrong or better than the other. There's just a preference there. And that's why even for me, one of the things I loved on your website is, like you mentioned, build the future of our communities. Typically, I just say, hey, contractor who does XYZ work, this is our services, this is scope, great. There's not much there versus like both from a client-facing standpoint as well as a employee-facing standpoint. I can stand behind that. Like build the future of our communities. I would love to be a part of that. Whether it's as a client, like, hey, you're contributing to our communities, both building this and then maybe job opportunities or things like that as a natural result of the building they're building, and also to employees like, hey, we're not just doing construction, we're building the future of these communities. Like, oh, there's a lot more deeper roots to that than just we do construction.
Yeah, that's our why. That is, sometimes when it feels hard, you need to understand why it's important to keep going, to keep, to have grit, and it is because, we all have communities that we work in, communities that we live in, maybe where we grew up. Those are the places that we invest in. Every one of our employees, the cities that they live in, we work with their local charities. We'll do things with their food banks, whatever it is. We're reaching out in multiple ways. And then when we have the pleasure of building a building within that community, that's such pride for that employee to be like, that's the company I work for. And we are building, when we build something so important like a Boys and Girls Club, where it's going to impact people, or we're building a church where people are going to gather, people are going to break bread, people are going to mourn, they're going to celebrate. Yeah. All of those things, that's building the future of a community. And that's why what we do is really important. And that's why it's something that, we keep going when things are hard. And that's what gets us through, is knowing that the future of that building is going to impact a lot of people's lives. And that's a cool thing.
Super cool. Incredible conversation, Tammy. Oh my word. Like I definitely feel like this could have been like I don't know if you've heard of Lex Friedman or like Joe Rogan, like a 5-hour conversation. I feel like I probably could have gone a whole day, but well done. Like I think from your story, I'm super encouraged by just the level of transparency that you've led with. I've talked to a lot of contractors privately, and not most of them aren't willing to share, hey, here's where I'm at. Here are my cards. And I'm sure that, for legal reasons, there's certain things that you don't want to disclose. Totally get that. But I think the level of transparency, honesty, vulnerability that you had is super refreshing. And I think voices like yours definitely need to be in the industry, and being able to share, obviously, like that post that you had 11 months ago. I'm like, man, why do we not hear more of Tammy on LinkedIn? So I definitely want to encourage you to continue to share your voice, because I mean, honestly, for me, and for those of you that are listening, I don't know if you have the same experience, but for me, like after hearing Tammy, everything that you've shared, I'm like, where do I apply, Tammy? Like, how do I join this team? And it's just this natural, there's this like steady peace, calm, and just honesty. And it's just super refreshing, especially in an industry where it can just be like, pound, pound, pound. Let's very, I don't know. It's just really refreshing for me. So great work on just everything you've built up to this point. I'm glad that 2026, like you said, is one of those years where you're like, okay, I feel like you're starting to get your feet under you and figure out this rhythm. And the reality is referring, I guess, closing the circle in a sense to the beginning post is, just because something's hard doesn't mean it's bad or doesn't mean it's not good. And I think that's been shown, it's been riddled throughout your entire story. And it's super cool to see from, like I said, from my perspective. And so for those of you that want to learn more, hopefully this is the encouragement for Tammy to post more content. So definitely go follow her on LinkedIn. And what's the website for Merit, the official URL?
It's meritnw.com.
Yeah. So if you want to go on there to either learn how to partner with Merit for your next construction project, or to apply to work here, or even have a conversation, even if there's no opening, I'm sure Tammy would be open to talking to some, from that standpoint. But once again, thank you so much, Tammy, for coming on the pod.
Thank you. Yeah, I loved the conversation. I thank you as well. You had a lot of good insight, and it was an interesting conversation. So it was great.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And we'll catch you guys in the next one.